Greetings all and welcome to the presentation on satellite writing. I'm so glad we're here. Mostly because revision is hard. It's one of the hardest things that writers face. Even worse than that blank page at the very beginning. Revision is just so hard. It's so easy to go, yeah, that's good enough, or yeah, I think I got it. Especially in storytelling, because there's so much that you can add to really make the story come alive for the reader. And satellite writing for me is a strategy for revision that can really take your writing to the next level. It allows you to zoom in on little moments, let them breathe, and let them really augment your writing. Whether you choose to add it to your final narrative or not, it still gives you that context and that grounding in all of the things surrounding your story. So the first thing I'm going to talk about with satellite writing is just give you a better definition of it, or maybe a more clear one. If you look at the little graphic on this slide, you'll see that in the center of that graphic organizer is where your narrative is. Think of it as your narrative is planet Earth. That's the ground, that's the center of this whole process. You will always be coming back to your story, whether you're bouncing out of your story to do more satellite writing, or whether you're trying to loop that satellite into your story. The ground is always your narrative. Then for satellite writing, you're going to start throwing those satellites up in the sky and let them shine a light down on specific moments or small moments in your story. So the first thing we're going to work on is description in your personal narrative. So we're going to be doing a lot of satellite writing on description, where you will zoom in on people, on places, and what we call props. So for example, I had a student last semester write a wonderful personal narrative about a motorcycle ride. And so one of the props in his narrative was his motorcycle, and he did some great satellite writing on a description of his motorcycle that then really augmented his overall story. You're also going to be doing some satellite writing using dialogue, where you zoom in on conversations and really try to get the details right. And then we'll zoom in on the so what. When we get closer to the end of the personal narrative, we'll do some satellite writing on your so what, so that you can really zoom in on the so what and think about really what this story matters to you, or how the story matters to you. And then also we'll be doing some satellite writing on tense, where I'll have you think about events leading up to your story and events after your story. Sometimes in writing those before and after time frames, doing some satellite writing on before and after your event can really add that element of time, so that when we start looking at tense and acts and playing with time, you have even more choices there. So again, satellite writing is a revision strategy where we get to bounce out of our narrative out into these satellites, and that we're not obligated to use any of them. And that's probably the freedom that any writer needs to do a good job in revision, is just that freedom to say, you know what, there's no risk here. I can try this, and if it doesn't work, I just won't use it. We call that the cutting room floor. Picture editing a movie and all the things that end up on that cutting room floor. In your satellite writing could end up there, but no matter how much you do, or how much you do or don't include, all of it together is going to help you, because it gives you that context and that grounding in your story. So we're going to try it. I'm going to guide you through some satellite writing. So a couple things before we get started. You're going to need some paper, a couple sheets, and so I don't have to say this after everything I ask you, I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm going to go way faster in this presentation than you're going to be able to keep up with what I'm doing. So you're going to need to pause. After every question I ask, just have your finger on that pause button, so that you can pause and have the time to do the listing and the thinking and the detailing and the comparing that I'm asking you to do. So I'm not going to keep saying pause, and I know that I'm going really fast. It's just so that the presentation doesn't lag on and become way longer than it needs to. So I'll just kind of keep asking questions, and I'll rely on the fact that you are going to pause the presentation after each question to do the writing that you need to do. So hopefully you have a sheet of paper out now, and step one is just think about your story. Just get your story in your head, get it in that right frame so you're ready to start making some lists. And the first list I want you to make is a list of all the people involved in your story. List everyone, no matter whether they're a major character or a minor character in your story, no matter what role they play, list all of the people involved. Next, I want you to list all the places or scenes where your story is set. Even if they're minor, even no matter how many times they change, I want you to list all of the scenes where your story is set. Next, I want you to list all of the important things or props in your story, like I mentioned before, like that motorcycle. List all of the important things in your story. If I was writing a personal narrative about my mother, I know it would have a teacup in the story, and so I would list maybe that teacup, maybe the tea inside of it. I would list that. Okay, now I want you to look at your list, and step 2 is to pick one thing from your list that you would like to focus on for the rest of our satellite writing time. Just pick one thing, not one thing from each list, just one thing overall. Okay, step 3, I want you to, on a new sheet of paper, to write your choice down on the top of your paper. And now I want you to think of this choice while you answer the following sensory detail questions. So you can see them on the screen. The very first one is, how does it look? Next, how does it smell? Next, how does it sound? Next, how does it taste? Does it have a taste? And finally, how does it feel? There's 2 directions to go here. You can talk about how it feels emotionally, or you can talk about how it feels to touch it. Okay, step 4, I want you to add the detailing to your naming. So if I was writing about my mother and I wrote cup of tea down, that's the thing, right? And so maybe in my detailing, I'm going to write the creamy, brown, sweet tea in the yellow teacup with green and blue and red flowers on it. I'm going to start adding those adjectives in. So do that next. And step 5, I want you to add the comparing. Now, know that figurative language is hard, and this is something you're going to really have to work on. It's easy for figurative language to be trite and sound silly and cliche and overused. So be careful here, but right now, just because you're brainstorming, anything goes. It's okay. Don't worry about it being trite yet. You can worry about that when you go to put it in your story. So work on those similes and metaphors and personification. Okay, step 6. Now that you have all of the listing of your naming, detailing, and comparing, I want you to look at the whole page. What is your overall dominant impression of your person, your place, or your prop? Your overall feeling about it, your overall impression of it. Write that down next. Step 7 is a little bit interesting in that I want you to think of your vantage point. Where are you seeing your image? So, for example, when I talked about my mother, I would be sitting at the table across from her, so she would be pretty close to me, and I would probably only see her from the waist up, right? But if you were sitting down and someone was standing up, that's a very different vantage point, looking up at them. Or if you are looking down on them, or if the person is across the room, maybe they're pretty far away from you. Where is your vantage point? And just jot some notes down about that, because that's going to help the structure of your description. Okay, step 8, last step of satellite writing. Take your lists, go to the discussion board, and do some writing. You're going to see in the satellite writing folder that there is a discussion board for your description satellite writing. I want you to go ahead and do that now. Use the topic you've chosen, use all the writing you've done, and start with a dominant impression. That should be your first sentence, and then write your description. All right, last part of this is what's going to happen next. So I'm going to encourage you strongly to do as much satellite writing as you can. Just because I've only required one descriptive satellite writing this week doesn't mean you should only do one. You've got lots of people, places, and props listed on your first list. Keep going. Keep trying. You'll get better and better, and it'll get easier and easier as you keep practicing. This week, you're also going to be doing some satellite writing on dialogue. So you're going to be pulling out conversations that happen in your story, and you're going to really focus on those. And then also, you'll be doing some satellite writing on tense. Like I said, those before the story, those after the story moments. You're going to also do some satellite writing on some tense. So I want you to enjoy this. Have fun with this. Students always tell me that this was one of the most powerful parts of learning how to be a better writer is learning to do some satellite writing. Take some risks. Try it. Because again, you don't have to incorporate any of it. If it doesn't work, it's okay, but at least you've tried it. So go and play. Really try and stretch and grow here and see what you can come up with. And remember, like I said at the bottom of this slide, all of the satellite writing you do is going to benefit your narrative because it gives you that context and that grounding for your story. Okay, please let me know how you're feeling about this. I'd love to hear how it's working for you, and good luck doing your satellite writing.